Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 16 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show. Well, we're meeting with Dirk Stallmann, the president of Verlo Mattress. And in 1958, two guys started making mattresses for their furniture store in Illinois, and the mattresses were a bigger hit than the furniture and soon became the focus of their business. And we're going to talk to Dirk about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
Franchise Teacher.
Would you like to know how to franchise your concept or grow your franchise business?
Meet the experts at Franchise Teacher.
The goal of Franchise Teacher is to teach, coach, consult, and advise. The team of experts at Franchise Teacher will evaluate your business model and present you with a winning business strategy.
Franchise Teacher will help you decide whether or not your concept works and if it's franchisable. Franchise Teacher is proud to have over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors.
Franchise Teacher are developers of over a dozen franchise systems, which include brick and mortar as well as home-based concepts of nearly 3,000 combined franchise locations.
Whether you need to add more units or get more customers, Franchise Teacher can help. We will teach.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn our proven system.
Coach.
Franchise Teacher will help you provide a game plan to succeed.
Consult.
Franchise Teacher will make sure you stay on track.
And advise.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn from our over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors. Take advantage of our free, no-obligation phone consultation. Simply go to franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
That's franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 16 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show. We're meeting with Dirk Stallmann, the president of Verlo Mattress. And back in 1958, two guys started making mattresses for their furniture store in Illinois, and the mattresses were a bigger hit than the furniture. Hi, Dirk. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Marty. It's great to be here.
Thank you. It's great to have you, Dirk. You wouldn't know this. I didn't realize Verlo Mattress was one of the very first franchises we had on our show. I think it was going back like 13, 14 years ago. So it's great to have you back on the show. And we always like to ask our guests, where are you calling from this morning, Dirk?
Calling from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Beautiful. And that's where headquarters is located, isn't it?
Correct. Headquarters is based right here in Milwaukee.
We kind of gave a little teaser, Dirk, in the beginning of the show. I mean, it's not, I've done 800 of these interviews, and I can't say that we've had many business models that go back to, or at least started anyway, in the 50s, and you're one of the few that I got
yeah, right.
That too. So it's very rare. Maybe, of course we can't talk about the whole history starting back in the 1950s to present moment, but maybe we could talk about, some of the highlights, or particularly since the last time we've had you on the show, which is over a decade ago.
Yeah, well, a lot's changed for the entire world in that time. And, if you think about it, Verlo started franchising back in the late 80s. So we've been doing it for a while. Yeah. And I think like some franchise brands, we kind of got into a sort of set of dormancy, and now we're starting to re-engineer and come back out. So I would consider us a re-emerging brand as it relates to franchise industry.
And your background is very impressive, Dirk. I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well and kind of what led you to come to Verlo, because I think your background is very important and it's a good fit for Verlo Mattress as well.
Yeah, so my background is predominantly retail driven, right? So I'm very lucky here in the Milwaukee area. We're also headquarters for Kohl's department stores. So I worked in their marketing department at the corporate headquarters in the Miami Falls. I also worked for some of you might remember Carson Perry Scott, based out of Chicago. We had a department store group. We were actually owned by Saks at the time. Okay. And I worked for them for 3-4 years, and then worked for one of the largest furniture and mattress retailers here in Wisconsin. They're a family-run operation called Steinhoffels. Okay. And that's where I really learned sort of the retail and big-ticket, e.g. Mattresses and furniture. So, which is a little different than department stores. Right. And then I also did some work for Meyer Superstores out of Grand Rapids in between there at an ad agency. So,
it's a very impressive background, Dirk. And a little tidbit too. I actually worked in the bedding industry as well. In the 1990s, I was working for Macy's, and we sold, the manufacturers, the big name manufacturers at the time. I guess your Sertas and Sealy's and things like that. But Verlo, I mean, is very different from those manufacturers. Maybe you can describe Verlo Mattress to our listeners and what makes them different.
Sure. So I think the big difference between us and the, as we call it, the S brands, but we now have to include a T because of Tempur-Pedic. Right. Yes. We actually make our own products. Yes. So we have a supply chain that reaches into all of the components and the raw materials that it would take to put a bed together. Right. And what happens is our local franchisee would then take those components and becomes the labor for manufacturing the bed. So in essence, we are a mattress factory. Now, I don't want to confuse people because people think factory, they think of, an auto manufacturing. Right. These are very small. Yeah. These can fit, a factory can fit into 8,000 square feet and still have a showroom attached and still service a community. So it is a little bit unique in that we're vertically integrated, and we literally go from raw materials to finished product.
Can the customers actually see their bed being made, Dirk? Does it go that far?
Absolutely. That's
incredible.
They can see their bed being made. In some cases, we have customers that ask for some customization that goes beyond the models that we show in our showroom, and we're happy to accommodate them. And it's more of a collaborative process, but we have customers that can see the beds being made, and many of our stores have glass between the showroom and the factory, and they can actually, at any given time, be able to look in there and see people working on beds.
I think it's so impressive for someone who's worked in the bedding industry. Of course, that was something that, we just didn't do, and I mean, so it's very impressive, and people love that customization, of course. And, my sales pitch used to always be, well, I know you hear this all the time, but like one third of our lives are spent sleeping, so I mean, it's such an important part of our life. And I'm thinking too, wellness has really become, not to say it's something new, but it just seems like it's more a bigger part of our lives today, isn't it? We talk more about that, don't we?
Oh, it's massive, and actually we're big fans. There's an author, a doctor that's based out of Berkeley, and he wrote a book. His name's Matthew Walker, and he wrote a book called Why We Sleep. And what we really like about that book is he talks about, we used to think of diet exercise, and sleep are sort of these three-legged stool, right, or the sort of pillar. And what Dr. Walker says is actually sleep is the foundation that diet and exercise are built upon.
Right.
If you're not getting good sleep, you really need to have that to optimize the other things that you're trying to do to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So it's a great philosophy. It makes a lot of sense. And
I think so too.
We're obviously big believers in it.
Sounds like technology does play a role in the business. It's a lot different today than it was back in 1958, of course. But how does technology play a role in your business today, Dirk?
Well, I mean, technology is critical for, I think, any franchisor, right? So as much as I like to say we're not in the software business, we kind of are. Right. We have some of our own proprietary software as it relates to help managing some of the KPIs that are important to us as a franchisor and a franchisee. Helps us manage our business more effectively, allows us to communicate in ways that, not necessarily require in-person. So video conferencing, obviously that was huge during the pandemic.
Right.
But, and the funny thing about it, it's just like franchising. There's no finishing line. Technology continues to change. We have to continue to change with it. And it's challenging, but it really does make a lot of things possible that just weren't possible before.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely well said. And I'm thinking about your industry too, Dirk. I'm not sure if you get tagged in the retail industry. I was mentioning the wellness industry earlier, but I mean, I guess it's safe to say, you think of the market size for your business and you just look at all the homes and you say, okay, how many beds are in those homes? It's safe to say the market is pretty huge for your business. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Our VP of franchise development always says, hey, who doesn't sleep on a mattress? Right.
It's a pretty large group. Yeah. And when you start driving around your neighborhood, or if you live downtown, or wherever it may be, and you start looking at residential density and understanding how many beds are in that particular house, how many bedrooms, how many beds are in that particular condo tower, and it starts adding up pretty quickly. Yeah, and it's the market is pretty significant. It is significant. We like to stump our guest every so often, Dirk, but what's been one of the most interesting things that's happened to you since being part of Verlo Mattresses? I'm sure you have a lot of interesting stories, but does anything kind of stand out over the years? Sometimes COVID was one of those moments, but does anything stand out for you? Yeah, I mean, COVID was certainly, I thought the Great Recession was ran us for a loop, but honestly, the pandemic was something that I don't think anybody had a game plan for. Nobody had ever experienced anything like that. Right. And I'm a fairly optimistic guy, but the sky was falling there for about 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah. Where we just didn't really understand what was happening. Fast forward, I think it made us a better franchisor because we banded together with our franchisees. We had weekly calls. It was an exchange of information because, as you know and might recall, things were coming at you from all sides. And whether, it was things like some of the COVID relief grants that were available, whether it was things affecting how communities were opening back up, and some of the mask mandates. I mean, there was sort of this really collaborative feel to the conversation because, again, what are you without your franchisees? I mean, we absolutely need them to stay in business, and we needed them to help us and help each other sort of figure out the best way forward. I think it's one of the benefits, too, of franchising, isn't it, Dirk, is that, if for those who were part of a franchise system during COVID, they weren't really by themselves. I'm thinking of the businesses that were kind of by themselves and like, oh, my God, what do I do? I have no one to talk to. I mean, you had that. It always goes back to that word support, doesn't it? Absolutely. And, I'd like to think that there were so many great ideas that we exchanged as a group. I'll tell you the biggest one was basically, hey, there's this thing that's sort of grant that's available, and maybe you need to start talking to your banks and understanding what that looks like. And I think something like over 80% of our owners actually got funded.
Wow.
So we had a tremendous success story there. And it couldn't have happened without that sort of collaborative process, everybody exchanging information, everybody wanting to help one another. And it really was a galvanizing moment for our system.
Yeah. We have a lot of food franchises on the podcast, Dirk, and,
sure.
But we don't have your type of industry or category on the show that often. So I'm going to have to ask, what types of, and again, you've been franchising for a while now, what types of characteristics does Verlo look for in their franchisees? What's important to Verlo or yourself in taking on a new franchisee?
Yeah, I think the type of candidate that we see converting to an owner, in our case, is people who like a little bit of hands-on. They like to have a tangible product that they're able to actually make. So, we still like to make things, at least some of us do.
Right.
I think that's important. I think another piece is being able to help people in the community. Because, again, back to that wellness play, right? We are in the business to help customers get a better life. And the better life starts with better sleep. I think that resonates with some of our candidates. I know we just signed some new owners recently, and that was a big play for her. She thought that the ability to help people in their lives was really important to her. Right, something that she could believe in. So, different angles, but both very rewarding.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Dirk. I was trying to think back to when I was selling beds in the 1990s, and to me, I don't know if someone resonated this message with me, but I just felt like I was doing such an important job. You know what I mean? Is that, yes, 33% of your life is spent on a bed. And I just felt like what I was doing was so important. And it sounds like that's what you're saying is you want in your franchisees, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's very interesting. Of course, you get people who have different skills. And another great thing about franchising, people bring their professional skill set to the table.
Right.
And the ability for them to help us become a better franchisor is really what it's all about. I mean, it's just a fantastic system. I absolutely love franchising. Just love it.
Likewise. Yeah, likewise. How does the training work today? I'm sure it's different from maybe when I had Verlo on over a decade ago, Dirk. But do they come out to corporate headquarters? How does that work?
Yep. So we still are big believers in face-to-face. We have a boot camp that new owners come out and participate in as they get closer to opening their location. And then we'll have more continuous training, and that's more available virtually. However, our our VP of Sales Ops is very busy in that he gets a lot of requests to go out and still do face-to-face training. And that's, you really can't replace virtual with face-to-face.
I agree.
We feel that it's this sort of hybrid approach that delivers the optimum experience for our franchisees. So it's difficult because it's hard to scale that, but at the same time, it's important, and we understand the significance of that.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's well said. A typical day, or if there is such a thing as a typical day for a Verlo mattress franchisee, Dirk, I guess it's more the retail kind of hours, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yep. Yeah, it's definitely a Monday through Sunday kind of arrangement. Our busiest days are, as you could imagine, the weekends.
Right, of course.
And when people have time. And it... generally speaking, is you have pretty good sales over the weekends. You manufacture the beds and deliver them during the week. And we'll have some sales during the week, but you develop a cadence. And generally speaking, you want to have enough coverage on those weekends to really make it, again, to optimize your sales.
Yeah. You've been part of franchising for a while now, Dirk, and I could sense that, as you mentioned earlier, you love franchising. You're a big believer in franchising. For our listeners, we call them aspiring franchipreneurs. Most of them have it in their mind that they want to get into franchising, but a lot of them in the early stages are confused because it seems like there's so much more out there today than there was a decade ago in terms of franchise systems and things like that. There's more to choose from. I mean, from everything you've learned up to this point about franchising, what advice would you give to our listeners then in their quest to buy a franchise?
Yeah, I think that you have to have a sort of personal interest in whatever concept you choose.
Yeah.
Again, like we had talked about for Verlo. If you really are interested in trying to help people sleep better at night, or if you really are interested in sort of having a tangible product that you can put together with your hands and put that out into the community, those are kind of two things that are big plays for some of our owners.
Right.
And likewise, if you love a great meal or you find a QSR that you just feel like, oh my gosh, this product just sings to me. To me, that's what puts you over the top, and that's what makes you, that just gives you that little secret sauce, no pun intended, to be a great owner, because you believe in it. And that credibility, it can't be faked. It can't be faked.
Right. Yeah. It's belief, isn't it? Yeah. And I think that's so important. If you could, and one of the things I want to ask you too, Dirk, is about location. I mean, what is is there such a thing as an ideal location for a Verlo mattress? Do you ever have standalones, or is it part of other stores? How does that work?
Yep. So we have all sorts of different real estate locations that vary from market to market.
Right.
We do have standalone stores. Some of our owners actually own their own real estate, which is another path to wealth and sort of generational opportunities.
Yeah.
And then we also have inline stores that would be in sort of strip malls and other sort of shopping areas or destinations throughout our franchise system.
That's great. If you could look into a crystal ball, Dirk, I mean, and that crystal ball could be a year, 3 years, 5 years. What are Verlo Mattress's plans for the future? Where do you see the organization?
Well, so we're on a pretty good growth curve. We just started getting serious about selling franchises last year. And since then, we've added 5 markets. I think we have approximately 20 units within those 5 markets that will be under development. And I guess looking forward, just continued success. We're having amazing discovery days with just some of the most amazing candidates. It's really fun to meet new people and understand their business background. I always enjoy picking their brain as much as they do maybe ours when they come to a discovery day. But it's really, we just see a continued path where we're going to continue to add markets and units for the next 3 to 5 years.
What's the best way there for our listeners to get more information on Verlo Mattress? Of course, as the franchise opportunity, but even the product itself. Any website you kind of direct them to?
Yep, you can absolutely hit our home site, verlo.com, and you can learn about our products. We also have a link out for franchise development. So if you're interested in becoming a Verlo owner, there's a contact page there, and I'll get you in touch with our VP of Franchise Development. So, but yeah, absolutely a great place to learn about the products and what we offer.
That's terrific. And I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you, Dirk. And I don't want to wait another decade to have you back on the show. So,
that would be wonderful. Maybe, that would be wonderful.
As you're growing. I love your franchise model, being someone who worked in the bedding industry. So, it was great to have you on the show today. This has been my pleasure, Dirk.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up in our next segment, we'll be playing a clip from our Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Franchisers, Are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, franchiseinterviews.com. Or you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. Our weekly franchise radio show where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Hi, everyone. This is Marty McDermott, the president of Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. You know, we've been hosting Franchise Interviews many years now, and during that time we've had some incredible quotes on the show. Today you're going to get to hear a quote from Peter Baldini. And Peter was a guest that we had on the show many years ago, and it's interesting because you can kind of go back 13, 14 years ago to our earliest podcast and still learn some great lessons. Peter is the Chief Development Officer for Moran Industries, and Peter, on this particular podcast, discusses some of the several advantages of franchising compared to non-franchise businesses, things like support, guidance, and instantaneous relationships. So here we go with Peter Baldini of Moran Industries.
You know, franchising is all about systems. It's about, you know, business systems that work, okay? And it's not always as all that specific to the widget that you're selling as it is to the systems that you provide the franchisee in order to run their business successfully. Okay? And Moran Industries has the infrastructure in place with all the various support systems that a franchisee really needs to be effective in how they run their business. Keep in mind that a new franchisee coming into owning their first business is not used to having to be the person with all the answers in several different areas of the business world. You know, so someone who opens up an independent business has to be the HR person, the operations person, the marketing person, the financial person. You know, all those different aspects have to be covered, and all those different decisions have to be made. And with a system like Moran Industries, one of the great things is that our franchisees don't really have to be the experts in all those areas. They can pick up the phone any day of the week, and they can call, you know, the marketing department, or the operations department, or the accounting department, and get support and answers for the decisions that they have to make on a daily basis. So that infrastructure, you know, is critical to the success of new franchisees who haven't owned their own business before.
Yeah, you're right.
And it starts all the way back in the beginning. You know, it starts all the way back in the beginning when they first sign those agreements with all the help that we give them in the startup phase. You know, you have two different aspects of it. You've got the startup support, where we're helping them with, you know, site selection and lease negotiation and equipment purchases and all those types of things. And then you move into a different area of development once they open their doors with the ongoing, you know, support that they receive.
Right, fantastic. You wrote that great article, Peter. It was called "Gaining an Edge with Vendor-Supplier Relations." I saved that one in my archives. It sounds like Moran Industries has strong relationships with their vendor partners, you know, which is fantastic for your new franchisees and your current franchisees, you know, just working with you guys. Did you want to talk a little bit about that and why it's like important?
Sure. I appreciate you mentioning that article. Didn't know that you had read it, but I actually, when that article was published, I got a lot of phone calls, you know, from people in the industry about that article.
Yeah.
And it was really kind of a fun article to write because it's something that that I guess you know, you have to be as old as me to you know, understand those experiences, you know.
Right.
but those vendor relationships are very important. You know, my mentor, you know, back years ago, I remember having dinner with him one night, and one of the things that he asked me a question. I said, "Geez, I'm not sure," and he said, "You know what the answer to that is?" And he said, "Well, you have to look at, in running a franchise company, you have to look at what all your available resources are to help your franchisees. And he asked me to define what my resources were. And I didn't define it real well at that time when I was a young kid,
Right.
But what I learned through that discussion early on was that you have a lot of different resources that, available to you that you don't always look at, you don't always recognize, and you don't always use properly. And the relationships with your vendors can be tremendous resources in helping your franchisees. We don't sell product to our franchisees. We're not in the product business. We used to be in the product business, and we decided that for our business, at least, some people do that well, but for our business, we decided that it was a distraction, and what we really needed to focus our energy on was our core business, which was being a good franchisor. So we went back at that time and began really establishing strong vendor relationships, negotiating well on behalf of our franchisees to give them the savings so that their cost of goods would be lower than their competitors. Found in the process that, we had many vendors who were willing to do other things for us, who were willing to share ideas with us on advertising and marketing support. For example, we've got a couple of vendors who have very strong marketing departments, and they work closely with our marketing department to help put together ad campaigns for our franchisees. So, the vendor relationships can be much more than just buying product, So our role with our vendors is to negotiate both, purchases and services on behalf of our franchisees to give them the best deal possible out there.
Absolutely. And the franchisees appreciate that, which I guess, you have a stronger relationship between the franchisee and franchisor, because you guys are
correct.
Out, so it's fantastic.
When we sold, several years ago, when we sold our wholesale parts distributorship, we actually sold it to one of our vendors as part of the negotiations with bringing them on as a
franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.